Welcome back to the FOI review series. Now we'll be going over Task E, which will be Flight Instructor Responsibilities and Professionalism. This, I do believe, is a required task in the PTS. Let's just check here real quick. Yep, this is a required task in the PTS, so let's make sure that we got this one down pat, that's for sure. So, first things first. We want to talk about being a good flight instructor. Like, we want to pass the test. We want to be a CFI. But I don't know about you. I personally want to be a good one. So, let's review what the PTS has in store for us and see what conclusions we can draw from them. First things first. First responsibility as an aviation instructor is to help students learn. Pretty straightforward with this one. If you're going to sit there and let your student kind of flounder on their own and do their thing and kind of read the book and perform in front of you, but you don't really help them, what are you doing as an instructor? Go use your commercial license somewhere else, because this is not your calling. Help students learn. Hugely important here. Now, before I continue, you will notice here we have a couple of differences between the PTS requirements and an acronym. So we'll drop off the acronym HELPS. We're going to help students learn, which we covered over there. We're going to make sure that we emphasize the positive. We're going to make sure that we motivate our students, keep them motivated. We need to make sure we provide adequate instruction. Keep them up to standards and safety of flight. Hey, I actually just realized this isn't quite it. We're minimizing student frustrations, which one of the steps of that process is keeping them motivated, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, this is HEMPS. HEMPS is not fully listed in the PTS, however, it is in the instructor's handbook, all of these things. So, we learn them anyways. First step, help students learn. We're going to check it off. You know what? Boom, we did it. We're great. Next step up, emphasize the positive. This is something we've referenced earlier. When we have students who are losing motivation, we need to make sure we emphasize the positive. Keep them up, keep them motivated, keep them going with everything. Minimize frustrations. For this, we can use the acronym MACBAG, and I'll get to that in a quick sec. Provide adequate instruction. Again, if we're just sitting there and letting the student kind of teach themselves in the plane, and we're like, yeah, that was all right, or no, like, do that again, that's not adequate instruction, you know? Yeah, that was great. Do it again, but next time try doing this instead. That would be better adequate instruction. Our goal as instructors is to bring our student pilots and make them into private pilots or recreational pilots or whatever you want to do. We want to bring them up to ACS standards. Now, the FAA recommends that we introduce the standards in the 3 hours before our check ride. However, they have to be brought up regardless. So we got to make sure when we do sign off the students for the check ride and say that I ensure their proficiency, they meet ACS standards. Finally, safety of flight. This one is actually pretty straightforward here. If you're flying with a student pilot, they're probably not going to be capable of doing traffic watch and flying the plane safely all at once. Make sure that they are aware of what they can do, but at the end of the day, you're still in charge of the safety of the flight. You are PIC. Now, let's talk about minimizing frustrations a little more. Perfect. So, the first step of minimizing student frustrations is going to be motivating our students. Pretty straightforward. Keep them motivated. Emphasize the positive. Do what you have to do to keep them ready and willing to show up at that training center every single day. The next step we want to cover is approaching students as individuals. Not every student learns the same. And this is kind of what I was touching on earlier when I was talking about barriers to effective communication, lack of common experience. If you don't have common experience, it's hard to relate, it's hard to communicate. Likewise, if you ignore common experience and you approach every student as the same person, you're not going to help. You're not going to really properly communicate with them and click. So take a minute to know each student. Sit down with them for a couple minutes in the first lesson. 20 minutes of getting to know them in the first lesson is not going to put them behind. Get to know them, see what you can do to help them. And again, it helps with motivation because it helps you figure out what makes them tick. The next C is to criticize constructively. We talked about this before with our critiques. No student wants to be given a critique without an answer, or at least a guide to an answer. So, criticize them constructively. Build them up, don't tear them down, and give them a reason or give them a solution to their issues. Don't just say you suck and then run away. Give them something, you know? Next on the list is keeping students informed. Keep Stu informed. No one likes to be kept in the dark. In fact, we go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, cognitive and aesthetic needs, same concept. Everyone needs to understand what's going on around them and how it's all working. Keep them informed of what the process is. Tell them what's next. Tell them what they just covered. Tell them what they can expect on the check ride. Next up, be consistent. Don't play good cop, bad cop with your students, especially in the same lesson. Don't start giving them praise for one thing and then crush their soul the next moment. Be consistent with the critique that you're giving them. Don't flip-flop. Give them a stable foundation to work with, you know? Next up, admit errors. When you goof, they know. I know I knew when my instructor was lying to me, and I'm sure you did too. Admit your errors, or admit when you don't know something, right? If you make a mistake, sure, fess up. And if a student asks you a question that you don't know, tell them, that's a great question. I actually don't know that. Let's look it up together and go through that process. Finally, give credit when due. I know I mentioned this before. Helps keep them motivated. Minimize frustrations, right? Give them credit when they deserve it. When your student absolutely nails that power off 180, you let them know. You let them know that they made that maneuver their pet. Anyways, we want to make sure that we give credit when due to our students. When they do something great, keep that positivity, keep that motivation, keep them going. So that's going to be minimizing frustration. Now, specifically talking about, just make sure here in the PTS, right, flight instructor responsibilities. As a flight instructor, we have to make sure that we keep track of students' physiological obstacles. Don't ignore these, right? We want to make sure, does a student have a fear of flight? Address it. Does a student, are they freaked out by all the noises the plane makes or the fact that there's a big, 30-something inch spinning prop in front of their face? Make sure, are they worried about G-forces? Is it every time they put themselves into a steep turn, they feel nauseous? It's our responsibility to address these obstacles and see what we can do to help students with them. Unfortunately, for some people, it just means not flying. But for the vast majority of students, it doesn't. It just means we need to work them into these types of things. We don't want to start stalling the plane on the first maneuver. We want to maybe give them some forces of flight lessons, just some basic putting around the practice area, nothing crazy. This helps obviously prevent massive negative experiences being their first time in the plane. Think primacy. Next, ensuring student ability. We want to make sure, again, it's our responsibility to make sure they're ready for the check ride. In your endorsement, you literally say that you have deemed that they are proficient at the tasks in whatever part of the FAR that they are, depending on the rating. You have to make sure they're, what's I'm looking for? They are able to do the flight, especially for a solo flight. I talked about this earlier, not wanting to solo a student who's unable to critique themselves. These types of evaluations are super important as a flight instructor. Make sure that you are aware of your student's ability. And if you're not, and you solo them, it's reckless and careless. Make sure you take care of it. Next, Let's talk about professionalism in the industry. Acronym for this, SAD PP. Great professional. This is SAD PP. So, the first step is sincerity. To be a good professional in your industry, you have to be sincere. You can't be fake. You can't make things up. You can't try to hide things from your students. Be straightforward with them, and they will appreciate it. And they'll tell you, I would hope, that they do appreciate it. I know I did for my instructors, because like I said, I've had bad instructors who haven't, and I've had great ones who have. Be sincere with your students. Next, acceptance of the student. We talked about this earlier. I forget which FOI I was referring to this, but here we are, we caught up. Acceptance of the student. You need to understand that the student is as they are. Your student will show up as your student, and if you don't like it, deal with it, you know? People are people, and not everyone is going to be your favorite person to work with or your number one student, but you got to treat them all the same. Accept what you have in front of you and work with them. After all, they're paying you, so do your job. Next is demeanor. If you show up with a garbage demeanor and you're just pissed off at everything and everything is annoying and you're just ready to go to SkyWest because you got them on the phone right now and like, come on, let's go, your student's going to hate it. And you're not going to be a professional. You're not going to look like a professional. You're not going to act like a professional because you're just not going to care. So make sure your demeanor exudes confidence, exudes positivity, excitedness. You're flying. You know how many people like 100 years ago or 200 years ago would have absolutely lost their mind if they had the chance to go up in a plane once, let alone to build over 1,500 hours in before you even start a career in jet aircraft. Exude that positivity. Be the change you want to see in the industry, you know? Next up is personal appearance. Some flight schools have uniforms, some have dress codes. That's fine. Abide by the code. But if you don't have a dress code, showing up in Crocs, gym shorts and a tank top is not the most professional appearance. Make sure you're neat, your hair and whatnot is neat and groomed, taken care of. Facial hair, some places require shaved facial hair for men. That's fine. Make sure you follow policies. Make sure you appear professionally. You don't have to wear a suit and tie in the aircraft, but look like you didn't just roll out of the dumpster this morning, And finally, we want to make sure we use proper language around our students. There is nothing more unprofessional than swearing in front of your student. It might be casual, it might just kind of come out, that might be who you are, that's fine. But just understand that it's something that a professional does not do. No one sits down in a business meeting and drops the F-bomb. You just don't. So, that's going to be instructor professionalism. Now, in evaluating a student, we have to make sure that we evaluate their demonstrated ability. Keyword here is demonstrated. I will highlight that 1,000,000 times over. We cannot just solo a student based on what they told us. Yeah, I feel like I'm ready. Perfect. He said so. He's ready. Let's just sign off on him. You gotta figure out what's going on in the student's head and what they actually show to you. If the student's not capable of performing the tasks highlighted in the why am I not thinking today? In the FARAIM, you can't solo them. So demonstrated ability. Likewise, we want to make sure we keep them notified of what's going on. Keep them up to date with the progress. Hey man, you're on your way. You're well on your way. You're doing great. You're ready for that check ride. You're ready for the solo. You got this. Keep them up to date. And the best way to do this is to write it out. Give them a written email, a text message, whatever it's going to be, so they can refer back to it. Now, of course, we also want to make sure that we correct their errors along the way, because we're not ensuring their ability if we're not fixing their mistakes. So make sure we do that. That's going to be ensuring student ability. I just went backwards there. My apologies. We went from ability to professionalism to evaluation. But the evaluation is on the same, I said the same concepts, but they do refer to evaluation. I'm sorry about that. We want it when we evaluate the student, keep them informed, correct their errors, so on, so forth. My mistake. Next, instructors and exams. So, like we said before, you are endorsing your student for their knowledge test, or for their practical test, or to solo the aircraft. Oh, solo is not the exam, but we are signing off on their endorsements. So first things first, we want to make sure that our sign-offs are legal. I have heard stories of people getting complex sign-offs and high-performance sign-offs, and they go and get their CFI rating, and the DPE looks at the sign-off, and they're like, hang on, this isn't legal. And the student's like, well, shoot, I've been flying these things for a year. So, AC 6165 is what we use to tell us how to properly endorse a logbook. So, I can't show you this right now, but I have it handy, I have it saved on my iPad, and I'll be ready to present that if need be. 6165 is going to tell us exactly how we have to sign these things off, and the proper procedures to getting a student into exam with the right endorsements. Now, that aside, we want to make sure that as instructors, we're protective of our records. All right? Now, we've talked about renewals before. I'm sure we're familiar with the whole process with the 5 students and the 80% pass rate, the FERC, so on and so forth. So be protective of that record. Shoot, I don't want to pay for a FERC if I don't have to. Let's keep that pass rate up high. Let's make sure students are properly evaluated, and I'm only signing off on people who are ready for the exams, no matter how pressured I am to sign them off. Now, as far as other training and other endorsements, let's say we're doing instrument proficiency checks if we have a double I, or we've got maybe class add-ons, type ratings, if I was able to give a type rating, that kind of thing. We can talk about 6198. And 6198 is going to basically tell us the processes we need to follow for IPCs or other flight reviews. Now next, we also have checkouts and other transitions, so high performance, tail wheel, high altitude, that kind of thing. The biggest thing we want to make sure we know as an instructor is we conduct these to performance standards held in the PTS. I'm not rated to give someone a tail wheel checkout, obviously, but if I were, I'm not going to let them land, and they're a commercial pilot, I'm not going to let them land beyond commercial standards. Keep those 200 feet on the normal landings. Keep the 100 feet on the short fields. If they demonstrate an inability to act in accordance with the license that they are holding, they do not get a sign-off from me, and nor should they from you. So make sure that we have that very, very, very clear. Next, we just want to make sure that no matter who we endorse for our tests, so practical or knowledge tests, keep those records for 3 years. 61, 189. If it's not already noted in your FAR aim, know it. This is going to be requirements for flight instructor record keeping. All right. That's instructors and examinations. Finally, professional development. Now, whether or not we continue on as flight instructors, what we can do in professional development is keep up our knowledge. And whether that is attending seminars, reading books, instructing, because honestly there's no better way to learn than to keep teaching it, going to classes or other schools, or college, getting a college degree. No matter what, keeping up in professional development is super important. And like it or not, like the word or not, networking is important. Keep in touch with people, learn from people, speak with people. You'll be really surprised the doors that open up for you, both internally and externally, and how things work out. So that is instructor responsibilities and professionalism, the required task in the CFI PTS. Pro development has been covered. We covered examination responsibilities, how to evaluate students, and our responsibility towards them. We've covered professionalism in our SAD PP, ensuring student ability, physiological barriers, minimize frustrations with that MAC bag, keeping our standards, adequate instruction, and helping students learn is part of our HEMPS checklist. It's double S, HEMPS. So, I hope that was helpful for you in covering Task E. Up next is Techniques of Flight Instruction. That is Task F. I'll catch you in the next one. See you.